I love the Harry Potter franchise. I was lucky enough to have the privilege of growing up with these movies, growing up together with these characters. I rewatched these movies so many times over the years, and in the past 7 months, I posted my experience of revisiting these movies on this channel. With this video, I want to now combine it all into one hopefully epic piece of content, by now also adding my ranking, which is something that I've held back with my individual revisits. And in the past 7 months, my video style has also changed quite a bit, from what started as a faceless channel to now this. So this isn't just a journey across the Harry Potter franchise, but also a small personal journey on how my video style has changed over the past months, and hopefully changed to the better. Also keep in mind that this isn't a classic review of all Harry Potter movies, but what it's like revisiting all these movies from today's perspective, and that will also impact my ranking. But now enjoy this revisit and ranking of every Harry Potter movie, starting of course with the one and only, the movie that started it all, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone. Of course, with a movie like this, it's hard to ignore the nostalgia. I mean, when I just hear that music at Hogwarts, I get the chills. Just that story of a cute boy that's been treated horribly for his entire life, who somehow still turns out as a kind, loving kid, who one day gets that letter that he's been invited to Hogwarts, the school of witchcraft and wizardry, where he finds out that he's not a nobody, but actually someone quite special, is something that I think everybody can still enjoy. It's basically the origin story of Harry Potter, and although origin stories were all over cinema in the 2000s, they have since then come a bit out of fashion, probably for their very repetitive storyline. It always starts with somebody at a dark or unhappy place in their life. Then something happens to them, or they discover something that changes everything.
You're a wizard, Harry.
I'm a what?
They get beaten down along the way, but emerge victorious at the end. It's a tried and tested formula that just works on the big screen. What makes this origin story so rewatchable is that the movie also puts a big emphasis on world building. And rightfully so, because it really is a fascinating world that J.K. Rowling created and the filmmakers brought to life. While Harry is our emotional anchor point, Hogwarts and everything around it is what really made this movie stand out. However, you definitely notice how the movie's main priority is Harry's origin and the world building. Setting up who Harry Potter is, Hermione, Ron, Draco Malfoy, Voldemort, what Hogwarts is, how the whole magical world works, the 4 houses, and they even took the time to integrate Quidditch, which was awesome. This, however, comes with the drawback that the actual plot of the movie is only really started in the last act. After 1 hour and 44 minutes, we find out that Voldemort is surviving on unicorn blood, and that kind of sets the actual plot in motion. It's not really a critique because I think the world building was more important, especially for the first movie in a series. But what is a critique is how the final act actually turned out. First of all, what could have been improved is the final 3 challenges they faced. They would have integrated more nicely into the rest of the story if they would have revolved more around something the 3 of them learned over the first year of school. Harry had to fly on a broom, for example. That was great, but the other 2 with the plant strangling them and playing chess utilized nothing that Ron and Hermione learned that year. They would have been just as good at these challenges before the first year of school. The second thing that I didn't like back then and still don't like today is the actual final battle with Voldemort or Professor Quirrell. I think it's a pretty weak final battle for an otherwise amazing movie. There's really not a lot of magic going on. You would think that if a wizard wants something from a little kid like Harry, he wouldn't have to try to grab it in hand-to-hand combat. And then there's the whole touching thing, that Professor Quirrell or Voldemort can't touch Harry, and when Harry does touch him, it burns him, and that's how Harry actually ends up defeating him. First of all, they're not consistent with it. In this moment, for example, he's touching Harry and nothing happens, but then when Harry touches him a second later, it suddenly burns him. And second of all, I know all this makes sense in that in the later movies we find out exactly why Voldemort couldn't touch Harry, and that's cool and all, but speaking strictly for this movie, it wasn't a satisfying ending for me. It would have been way cooler if Harry would have needed to use his creativity or some spell that he learned earlier to defeat Voldemort here. And speaking of using a spell, did you ever notice that Harry Potter doesn't use his wand once in this entire movie? Well, okay, that's not entirely true. He did once stick it up a troll's nose. But he never used it to cast a single spell. It's definitely a weird choice by the filmmakers. I wonder if they actually filmed some scenes where Harry uses magic but just ended up cutting them for other reasons and then nobody really noticed. The CGI in this movie holds up okay. They do make sure to not use too much of it, which is a wise choice for this movie from 2001, because CGI for live action movies just wasn't there yet. The troll and the three-headed dog look good enough that it didn't bother me watching it in 2024. The Quidditch scenes only use relatively simple effects, which is why that still looks amazing. Only exception for that is a scene where Neville crashes his broom where they use a full CG double, which is pretty rough, especially from today's perspective. But it's only a short scene, so it's totally fine. Now before we'll get into how watching this movie as an adult changed my experience, let's revisit the 3 scenes I enjoyed the most when watching this movie today. My first favorite scene is the Hogwarts sorting ceremony. The Sorting Hat ceremony is one of the most iconic scenes in the entire franchise. It not only sets up Harry's placement in Gryffindor, but also introduces the 4 Hogwarts houses and their distinct identities. The suspense as the Sorting Hat contemplates putting Harry in Slytherin gives a glimpse of the internal conflict he will face later on. It's something that totally works in the moment because all we know at this point is that Slytherin is evil, so we hope Harry isn't classified as evil. But when revisiting this movie, we know that a part of Voldemort lives within Harry, which further enhances this scene. My second favorite scene is Harry's first Quidditch match. Quidditch is a quintessential part of the wizarding world, and first impressions matter, and I think they really nailed the first impressions of Quidditch, which is probably a big part of why so many people love it today. Harry's first experience playing is exhilarating for both him and the audience. I love that the filmmakers took the time to include this, and as I said, the CGI still holds up to this day. My third favorite scene is Harry getting his wand. I just love about this scene that they explain just enough so that you're satisfied yet intrigued. He first tests 2 wands that were similar to the ones his parents used, which both don't work, but the wand that does end up working is the same type of wand Voldemort uses. But watching it again now, I realize that we only truly understand what's going on here until I think the 6th movie, where we find out that Harry is a Horcrux. It's just awesome to have things in the first movie make more sense after having watched the later movies. One scene that did hit very differently for me as an adult was the first Quidditch lesson. As a kid it was all fun and games, but as an adult I couldn't stop thinking about how bad this teacher was. It was so bad that I ended up making a separate video on that, and the link to that video is in the video description. Another aspect that stood out is the movie's heavy reliance on child actors. When you watch this movie as an adult, your standards do tend to be a bit higher, so the child actors do stand out a bit more. Especially when it's just them and they don't have an adult actor to bounce off of, they sometimes just seem a bit awkward.
What? Honestly, don't you two read?
But considering the sheer amount of children in this movie, it turned out rather well, and the adult actors are all phenomenal. Alan Rickman as Professor Snape is especially fascinating to watch, not just for his long pauses.
Clearly, fame isn't everything.
But knowing his backstory after having watched all the other movies makes this character very rewatchable. Other than that, the special thing about rewatching this movie as an adult is just reliving that innocence and wonder of childhood. The first Harry Potter movie really captures that sense of awe and wonder that comes with childhood. Harry's entry into the magical world mirrors a child's entry into the wider world with all its magic, mystery, and potential. Adults can appreciate this journey, remembering the excitement of discovering new things and the purity of childhood dreams and fantasies, still far away from the complexities of adult life. It's that warm, fuzzy feeling we all get when rewatching this. And now to the ranking. Where does Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the movie that started it all, place in my ranking? Well, for me, it's a solid P4. As the first movie in the franchise, it will of course always be special, and I hope that I'll never lose that nostalgic feeling of revisiting the first movie. It did an amazing job at setting up the world and the characters of Harry Potter, but all that world building and setup comes at a cost, which is why it only ranks P4 for me. So that was the first movie. Now let's take a look at the second entry in the Harry Potter franchise, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Every director has his unique style and interpretation of Hogwarts, and we'll go on to see many different versions of Hogwarts in the next movies, but this movie keeps things relatively unchanged, which, as the second entry in the franchise, is, I think, a good thing. The layout of Hogwarts is pretty similar, and it keeps the characters in focus who were also very relevant in the first movie, while subtly introducing new characters into the world like Lucius Malfoy or the Weasley family. It also keeps many of the Hogwarts routines from the first movie. We start at the Dursleys, then we're off to Hogwarts Express, the year of school starts, we get our Quidditch matches, and so on. This makes it feel familiar, but to keep things interesting, all of these routines have a unique twist. Harry and Ron have to take a car instead of the train, an enchanted ball tries to harm or kill Harry, students are found petrified, and so on. This makes us feel at home in the world, but keeps things unique and lays the groundwork for the story to come by intriguing us into finding out what's wrong at Hogwarts this year.
A voice only you can hear, and then Mrs. Norris turns up petrified. It's just strange.
Because the first movie did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of world building, this movie can focus a lot more on the story it wants to tell. This starts with all the little twists we get at the beginning, and as we continue through the school year, the weird or horrible incidents become more and more frequent until the school is close to being shut down. Which I could totally understand, because this school is freaking dangerous. But that's the case in all Harry Potter movies. This focus on story makes the pacing feel a lot better for me in this movie. And while the first movie had more of a classic origin movie style, this movie takes a more thriller-like approach, which feels like a great addition to the franchise, as this gives us the opportunity to learn more about the history of Hogwarts and Harry Potter in an organic way, because it's all relevant to the Chamber of Secrets. We found out about the founders of Hogwarts, like Salazar Slytherin, how he's a Parseltongue and Harry is also a Parseltongue. That way we first find out that powers of Voldemort got transferred to Harry, and we revisit the decision of the Sorting Hat as Harry is shocked by his connection to Voldemort. I didn't miss any of this in the first movie, but it was awesome to find out, and that's exactly how a second movie should expand the world.
You're a parcel mouth? Why didn't you tell us? I'm a what?
You can talk to snakes.
It's not all positive though. If you want to nitpick this movie, there is plenty of stuff to talk about. Like how this giant ass snake is supposedly wandering around the walls of Hogwarts, and even if that's the case, why didn't any of the ghosts see it? Or how Dumbledore must know that Gilderoy Lockhart is a fraud, so why did he hire him in the first place? I mean, Dumbledore is shown again and again to be really smart. And Lucius was literally about to Avada Kedavra Harry in front of Dumbledore's office. Like, how did he think that would go out? Just to name some examples, but I have to say that these things didn't really bother me while watching the movie. What did bother me, however, is again the final battle. If you saw my video on Harry Potter 1, you may remember that for me the weakest aspect of that movie was the final battle, because it featured almost no magic and ended up in a hand-to-hand combat between a grown man and a kid. So coming from that, I guess you could say that this movie has an amazing final battle. I mean, at least there's a fantasy creature involved and a sword, so hey, that's something, right? Jokes aside, it's still a pretty weak final battle for a Harry Potter movie. And I just ask myself, why? Why can't we have a final battle in a Harry Potter movie where Harry has to use magic in a creative way? And I don't mean pointing his wand at someone as hard as he can, but actually doing something creative, like a levitation spell to gain the high ground, or instead of throwing a rock to make a noise, he uses a spell that makes a noise. And I know that he doesn't do it here because he doesn't have the wand, but then just don't have him lose his wand. I mean, the battle is cool and all, but it just annoys me that this movie isn't utilizing what makes it unique. I can think of many other fantasy worlds where you could have a kid fight a giant creature with a sword, but there aren't any fantasy worlds where you have a magic system like Harry Potter, so why don't they use it? Especially if the same movie introduces something like the dueling scene between two wizards. This scene gave us a glimpse of how awesome two wizards dueling could be if you actually put some thought into it. Having this scene and Harry Potter fighting a snake with a sword in the same movie almost makes it worse for me.
Scared, Potter. You wish.
Just like with the first movie, the effects in this movie hold up really well for today's standards. I'd say the most important effects that could feel outdated were the Quidditch match, the spiders in the Forbidden Forest, the basilisk from the final battle, and of course Dobby. but all of them look good enough today that it didn't break the immersion, which is the most important part of visual effects. Actually, somehow I feel like the effects were better in this movie than the first one, although it came out only 1 year later and actually had a lower budget, so I'm not sure how they did that, but I'm not complaining. Another thing I wanted to mention that changed from today's perspective that didn't really fit anywhere into the rest of the script, but neither did it fit in the movie, is the last scene where Harry and Hermione hug, and Hermione and Ron are all weird. I think I need to throw up. This teases what will develop between these characters in the next movies, and I hate it so much. Harry and Hermione feel so much better together, at least in the movies, but more on that in the next videos. I also want to give a special credit to Richard Harris, may he rest in peace, because I just love this version of Dumbledore. The Dumbledore we get in the next movie, played by Michael Gambon, may he also rest in peace, has its own strengths and is also featured in some scenes where I think this version would have struggled, but since he isn't involved in any action scenes so far, I love this portrayal of the character and the chemistry he has with Harry Potter. And he's just so smart and chill about everything. The only thing I don't like is that he just stood there and watched his friend Hagrid get sent to frickin' Azkaban.
Take me where? Not Azkaban prison.
I will, of course. Step aside.
But there are good scenes that make up for it, and that brings me on to my 3 favorite scenes, because my first favorite scene is at the end when Dumbledore says to Harry that it's our choices that define us and not our abilities or heritage.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
I love this message so much, and it's so fitting for Harry because he could have done really well at Slytherin if he had chosen that. It reminds me of my video on the life lessons in the Matrix, where it's all about the importance of choice. My second favorite scene is the introduction of the wizarding duel.
2.
I already mentioned that this scene is great, so it deserves its own spot in the top 3 scenes. I really wish we would have more of this in the Harry Potter movies in general, but later on they sadly switched to not even saying the spell they're casting anymore, so at that point it's just about the spectacle and not about the intricacies of the magic system. So I'll always remember this scene as a small sample of how cool duels between wizards could have been. And scene 3 is the journey to Diagon Alley, or Diagon Alley.
Diagonally.
What did you say, dear?
It's nothing special, but it's just an amazing addition to the world of Harry Potter, and things like this make the world feel more realistic, because of course wizards would have some form of magic transportation. And I also love this because it's used again in later movies, so it's really nice to have that established here. Now to the question, what changed when I watched this movie again as an adult? Well, first of all, I appreciated the mystery thriller aspect a lot more as an adult. I just now realized that as a kid there were a lot of things in this movie that I didn't really understand, and when that happens you quickly lose that mysterious feeling. Besides that, the theme of judging others because of their heritage hit harder for me. This movie introduces mudbloods and purebloods for the first time, so basically wizard racism.
Call me a mudblood.
He did not.
What's a mudblood?
As a naive child, these were all just meaningless words to me, but now I get why this would be a problem, and of course there would be something like this in the wizarding world. It will be interesting to see if that aspect finds its way into the highly anticipated Harry Potter remake. Although I can't really imagine. Well, at least in this movie it gives us one more reason to hate people from Slytherin. I mean Draco Malfoy. I don't want to be judging people just because they belong to a group. Moving on. Just like with the first movie, one thing I noticed when revisiting this movie as an adult is just the nostalgia. The nostalgic, childlike feeling I had with the first movie carries through into this one. It's just nice to watch these kids grow up, and the acting already feels way better. All 3 of them took a big step up in their acting game. And because this is another quote-unquote normal school year, with Quidditch, the 4 seasons and so on, and has the same general vibe as the first movie, it all feels familiar and nostalgic. And now, where does Harry Potter 2 fall in my ranking? Well, for me, it ranks P7. Yes, only P7 for this one, but at this point I want to mention that even the worst Harry Potter movie isn't a bad movie. Like, the standards in this franchise are just so high that Harry Potter 2 just slightly misses out for me. And remember, I'm ranking these movies from a revisiting perspective. And from that perspective, this movie for me has the problem that I don't have the same nostalgia for this one that I have for the first movie, so It lands in this awkward position where the characters are still kids and it still has the same childish style of the first movie, but without the same level of nostalgia. It's not a movie that I like to revisit as much as some of the more serious, more adult-oriented Harry Potter movies that we get later in the franchise. So that's why it's only P7 for me. And now let's take a look when Harry Potter movies suddenly got serious with Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I guess the first thing everybody will notice in his yearly Harry Potter marathon is the overall change of tone in this movie when compared to the first two. This Harry Potter movie loses that cute, childlike nostalgia for a world that feels a lot grimmer and more dangerous. As much as I love to revisit that childish style, I think this tone is a lot more fitting to what the Harry Potter movies eventually build up towards. And at the same time, it takes a very important step in having the world of Harry Potter mature with its audience and its actors. Daniel Radcliffe was 15 years old when this movie came out, and the character of Harry Potter is, I think, 13 years old. So you can start to play with some horror elements and have the characters deal with some more serious topics, like who assisted Voldemort in killing Harry's parents, and should they be murdered as well, or go to Azkaban.
I'm gonna be ready. When he does, I'm gonna kill him.
Having Harry say things like that is a huge change from the first two movies, and I'll go deeper into these adult themes later. With that change in tone, I think the filmmakers also managed to make this version of Hogwarts a lot more authentic and immersive. This starts with subtle but great details like having the actors dress up themselves, just like they would when they had to put on a school uniform like this in real life. So gone are these always perfect dressed kids, and now they look messy, more relaxed, and like actual young students. I know this can feel like a minor detail, but it's actually one of my favorite things about this movie. How do you feel about the new look of these characters?
I think they're funny.
Oh yeah, terribly funny. Really witty.
But the students don't just look different, they're also allowed to behave differently. They're just allowed to goof around more, and Draco feels more like a real bully in this movie. The filmmakers also take the time to include scenes like this one.
Don't try one of them. Oh, no. Oh, look at this. Look at his face.
It's a scene that doesn't advance the story, and nothing from this is relevant later on, so it's a scene that could easily be cut out or not even have made in the first place. But I love that they kept it in, or made it in the first place, because this scene is actually not from the books. It's such a simple scene, but it shows us that they really are just a group of kids, and kids like to goof around. This can easily be overlooked because Harry is always our hero in these stories and has done some amazing things. So this reminds us that despite all of that, he is just a kid. This is also the first Harry Potter movie that really physically expands the world of Harry Potter. The layout of Hogwarts is more spaced out by having Hagrid's hut not immediately outside the school walls, instead it's a short walk away. Or the Whomping Willow that's now not on the school ground anymore but has its own location. We also visit places outside of Hogwarts, like Hogsmeade while they're on a school trip. Harry even couldn't go because he has no parents that would allow the trip.
Professor, I thought if you signed it, then I could go.
I can't. Only a parent or a guardian can sign.
Details like this really add up over the course of the movie, which makes Hogwarts feel more and more like a real school. Other examples that add to the authenticity and the darker tone of this movie are things like the Quidditch match that takes place in the rain. This not only looks amazing, but also fits into the realistic, more mature representation of Hogwarts. I mean, in a real school, matches like this would happen. It can't always be perfectly sunny like in the first two movies. Also, this is the first time Harry doesn't manage to catch the snitch, which, when we're talking about realism, feels like about time. Now, as always, you know I love to talk about the final battle in Harry Potter movies. In my last videos, it was sadly less talking, but more of a rant about how little magic Harry used and how I would love for him to use magic in a creative way. So now, with this amazing Harry Potter movie, have my wishes finally come true? No. We still didn't get any creative use of magic in this movie, but I love the final battle anyway. And here's why. Well, for starters, you won't believe it, but Harry actually uses a magic spell in the final battle and doesn't use a sword or his bare hands. That's a big upgrade already, if you ask me. However, they still make sure to give us that classic wizard with a wand decides to throw a rock instead scene. I guess magic is good and all, but throwing a rock never fails. Jokes aside, I guess if they would just bombard this werewolf with powerful spells, the final battle wouldn't really work, and I guess you could also argue that they don't use a spell because they don't want to harm Professor Lupin.
Oh, Professor Lupin's having a really tough night.
In any case, I'll give them the pass for that. The important part is that Harry eventually uses a spell, and not just any spell, but a spell that was set up prior to the final battle and we actually learned a lot about. It wasn't creative because we only know one spell against Dementors, so what other spells should he use? It's not exactly what I would call creative. But because Expecto Patronum got a proper setup and isn't like any other spell, this approach might be even better than having Harry be creative. Expecto Patronum is set up as a very powerful, difficult spell that not every student learns. It's not your average first grade levitation spell.
You know, this is very advanced magic, well beyond the ordinary wizarding level.
And it's also not a spell that you just cast. Instead, there are power levels to it, and they don't just tell us this as an exposition, but really take the time to show us how this spell works and how Harry struggles to cast it for the first time. For me, that alone would already be enough to make it a satisfying ending, but they took it a step further by having the power of the spell tied to the happiest memory the person can think of. That way the spell also gives us an insight into Harry Potter. At first, the happiest memory he could think of was flying on his broom for the first time, which just shows us how few happy memories he has to choose from. In the final battle, however, his Patronus becomes extremely powerful, and not just because the script needs it to be, but because he has a new happiest memory. And that's when Sirius Black offers him to live with him.
When we free him, I'll never have to go back to the Dursleys. It'll just be me and him.
Because of that, now Harry doesn't just win against the Dementors and save Sirius Black's life, but we also get the spell as a visual representation of how happy Harry was in that moment. It's just an amazing final battle. Finally, it was about time. Oh, and did I mention that during that greatness we also get time travel? I think I've rambled on long enough, so I'll keep this short. The time travel is satisfying, very well executed, a huge surprise when you watch the movie for the first time, and makes this movie very rewatchable. I feel like we just don't get things like this in movies nowadays. They could have left this entire time travel part out and the movie would have still worked, but it's things like this that take a movie from good to extremely memorable.
When in doubt, I find retracing my steps to be a wise place to begin.
The CGI takes another big step up from the first Harry Potter movies, this time also with a slightly higher budget. The Dementors look great with that amazing frost effect, the magic in general looks great, Buckbeak looks awesome, and I have no complaints about the CGI from today's perspective, and that really speaks volumes on the quality it had back then. I'll never forget the transformation of Professor Lupin into werewolf. This traumatized me as a kid. And speaking of that transformation, that brings me on to my top 3 scenes in this movie. With this movie, it was really tough to decide which 3 scenes are my favorite. There are just so many great scenes in this movie, and I would love to give them all credit. But then this video would be about 5 hours long, so let's keep it at 3. My first favorite scene is the werewolf transformation I just mentioned. It's one of my favorite scenes for so many reasons. First of all, what an awesome character design and transformation. Just the visuals alone, I mean. The design for the werewolf is so great. In my mind, this is how a werewolf should look, not that big dog shit from Twilight. When I think of a werewolf, I don't think of a big dog that someone would like to cuddle with. Instead, I think of this creature in Harry Potter. With its short gray hair, long thin limbs, but huge size, it looks so creepy and dangerous. It's also cohesive with the design from Sirius Black. And how Professor Lupin also transforms into this creature is so well done. The CGI in the 2000s was legit. I also love how Professor Snape instantly goes into protector mode once he sees the werewolf, but I'll talk more about that later. My next favorite scene is Harry flying on Buckbeak. What can I say? It's just an awesome scene. It's great to get a little feel for the surroundings of the castle, and the CGI again stands the testament of time, and Buckbeak isn't just a one-off show pony, but is relevant to the story later in this movie. That way this scene integrates very nicely and doesn't feel like an unnecessary extra. It's also just so refreshing to see Harry smile and full of joy. My last favorite scene is the introduction of the Dementors. What an iconic scene, right? This train ride with the attacking Dementors really sets the tone for the year of school to come. For the first time, the train ride isn't on a bright, sunny day and full of nostalgia. Instead, the weather is already very grim, and the freezing effect of the Dementors makes everything feel more harsh and scary. Also, the Dementors don't just attack Harry for no reason, but because of his dreadful past and his connection to Voldemort, which is something we don't know for certain now, but is just another of those subtle hints that pay off when you revisit this movie. I remember that as a kid, this movie felt like a full-on horror movie to me. That feeling is now gone. As I said, the Dementors and the werewolf effect still look great, so it's not because the effects look goofy for today's standards, but I've just watched a lot more real horror movies since then, so while there are definitely horror elements in this movie, it takes a bit more to traumatize me now. But there are also some scenes that kids might find scary, and for adults they're more goofy than scary. For example, I'm almost ashamed to say this, but as a kid, this book used to scare the shit out of me, and now I just had to laugh at this scene. But on a serious note, this movie introduces a lot more adult themes to these young characters. The biggest one for me is dealing with loss. The Dementors force Harry to confront his fears and negative emotions. So for the first time, we reflect on his parents' death and consider how much this loss affects him. His growing desire to learn about his parents is relatable to anyone dealing with long-lasting effects of losing loved ones, a theme that resonates more with an adult audience. Then there is also the theme of vengeance. The story emphasizes the consequences of holding onto anger and hatred, particularly through Harry's struggle with how to handle Sirius Black, who supposedly assisted the murder of his parents. And when we find out that it was actually Peter Pettigrew, Harry decides to spare his life instead.
Peter, but if Voldemort didn't kill you, then we would. Together. No!
This introduces a complex ethical dilemma about mercy, revenge, and justice, highlighting a more mature understanding of morality. As I mentioned earlier, I also love how Snape went into full protector mode once he saw the werewolf. I'm sure we all noticed this when we first saw the movie, but probably didn't think much more of it, at least I didn't. I just thought, oh, so Professor Snape is not completely evil, that's nice, and moved on. But now that I've revisited this movie after having watched all the other movies, and now knowing where Snape ends up as a character and what he's been going through all this time, this little moment is everything to me. I mean, we need to remember that Snape has been mean to these three kids for so little reasons, and sometimes for no reason at all. And this time, Harry literally attacked him a minute ago, so Snape would have every reason to be angry with them. But despite all that, he doesn't even hesitate for 1 second, and instantly is prepared to risk his life for them. From an adult's perspective, maybe Snape has a similar protective feeling towards Harry as he would with his own child because he loved his mother so much. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The later movies deal with that a lot more. This is just a fun teaser. These themes make Prisoner of Azkaban one of the most mature and introspective films in the series, as it tackles concepts that resonate more with an adult viewer who can appreciate the nuanced portrayal of loss, revenge, and parenting. And now, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Where does it fall in my ranking? I think we can all agree that it should be at least in the top 3. Well, for me, it's actually P1, baby. I titled my video on Harry Potter 3 Timeless Masterpiece, and I fully stand by that statement. I think this is the best standalone Harry Potter movie in the franchise, which is also why I'm ranking it P1. It's not great because it's the first movie or because it's the last movie in the franchise. It's simply an amazing movie by itself. And it's even more amazing because it's part of a franchise. And that's what I truly love about it. And now it's time to revisit one of the more controversial entries in the Harry Potter franchise, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Especially looking back, does this movie have some weird character and plot choices? Absolutely, and I'll get into all of those, but let's start with what this movie does great. Starting with the general vibe of this movie. While Harry Potter 3 took a big risk by switching from childlike to a more serious, almost horror-like tone, I think Harry Potter 4 is a great continuation of that style. It cuts back on the horror a little bit, but keeps it very serious while subtly introducing that awkward teen romance theme, which the next movie of course pumps up into overdrive, but we're not there yet. In this movie, the characters are just slowly starting to deal with relationships and the problems that come with this.
Next time there's a ball, pluck up the courage and ask me before somebody else does.
Also, having Hogwarts host the Triwizard Tournament, which introduces us to students from other schools, plays very well into that teenage drama. It's also yet another very welcome expansion of the wizarding world. I just love how movie after movie we're slowly introducing elements outside of Hogwarts. Never too much at once, but always a satisfying amount. It makes the world feel real and alive, as there's always something new to discover. While in the last movie the Quidditch at Hogwarts and the points that each house gets at the end of the year was the real deal, in this movie nobody cares. It's actually not even brought up anymore. Instead, we get to see the World Championship of Quidditch and a tournament between different schools. And speaking of these different schools, this is in the end a video about watching Harry Potter in 2025, and while many things are different from today's perspective, one aspect that I couldn't help but notice is how the two new schools that are introduced to us are like the most extreme stereotype representation of women and men. The women are dressed very nicely, have a very cute entrance to the point where they make butterflies appear.
Bloody hell.
And the men look all serious as they shout and bang their staff into the ground, making sparks and even breathe fire. I'll let you be the judge of this. All I want to say is that this would be received very differently if it were published today. But speaking of breathing fire, the CGI in this movie is amazing. Things like the dragon or the underwater creatures hold up really well even for today's standards. It's not only technically amazing, but also the design choices are great. That's especially true for the introduction of Lord Voldemort. This is the first movie that shows us Voldemort as a fully alive version of himself, so that sets the standard for the movies to come. And looking back, it would have been really easy to mess this up, but I think this visual representation of Voldemort is amazing. Today we all take it for granted that this is just how he looks, but if you take a step back, you can really appreciate this moment. It's exactly how I would imagine a Dark Lord to look like. Now let's address some of the movie's shortcomings. As much as I like the idea of the Triwizard Tournament, from a realistic perspective, what we actually end up seeing here is completely barbaric. I mean, they don't have to do this tournament. They're doing it for fun, for the glory, and the entertainment. So why are these challenges so deadly? I mean, they're literally risking these kids' lives for fun. Like we're suddenly in the Colosseum watching gladiators fight for their life. Like, isn't Hogwarts already dangerous enough? Why do we need to put these students in extra danger for fun?
That's completely mental.
And that's not even mentioning how this group of adults, including the wisest wizard of Hogwarts, Dumbledore, deciding that although Harry is too young for the tournament, and they are aware that something evil is at play here, they should just let him take part in it and see what happens. Sure, let's risk Harry's life to see what happens. What could possibly go wrong?
He's back! He's back! Voldemort's back!
Oh yeah, probably that could go wrong. Story and character-wise, this is in my opinion the biggest shortcoming of this movie, and probably something that annoys the book fans even more, as many of these scenarios were not in the book, or at least very different in the book. You probably all know this viral clip.
Did you put your name into the goblet of fire, Harry? Dumbledore asked calmly.
Harry, did you put your name in the goblet of fire?
But having said that, the advantage of the Triwizard Tournament is that it puts a unique twist on the classic Harry Potter routine and gets us to the action very quickly. Usually Harry Potter movies take some time to build up, as we start with the Dursleys, Harry takes the train to Hogwarts and so on. In this movie, however, Harry is fighting a dragon after like 50 minutes, and that's only his first challenge. Having this tournament dominate this movie gives it a very unique identity in the Harry Potter lineup and takes us through many great yet very different action set pieces. Just like I'm now going to take you through my 3 favorite scenes in this movie. My first favorite scene is the lesson with Mad-Eye Moody.
Which curse shall we see first? Weasley!
Yes.
Stand!
Yes, we see Mad-Eye Moody earlier, but this is our first real introduction to the character, and it's so captivating. It's a scene that could easily be boring since we spend about 5 minutes just in this classroom, but this introduction to his character is so intriguing. We also go through so many emotions in this scene and learn about the 3 curses, which is very important for this movie, but also for all the other movies to come. Congrats to the actor Brendan Gleeson for having such an amazing presence in this scene, or actually in this entire movie. Also his reveal and setup, how he made it possible for Harry to win the tournament, is done exceptionally well, and is even better when you watch the movie a second time. This next scene is a lot shorter and less important, but it's still great, and it's Snape being Snape. Or should I say Alan Rickman being Snape.
I'll tell you that we'll do it. Tonight when we get back to the common room.
Do I even have to say anything? This is one of those subtle scenes that you just remember as Alan Rickman makes this role even more his own. My last favorite scene is actually more of a set piece, and that's the entire Christmas dance.
Dress robes.
Dress robes? For what?
As I said earlier, I like how this movie subtly introduces that awkward teenage romance, and having this Christmas dance is just the perfect catalyst for more awkwardness. And it's so refreshing to see these kids that fight dragons, trolls, and huge spiders deal with something that us normal muggles also deal with, and that's finding that date for the Christmas ball.
Why do they have to travel in packs? And how are you supposed to get one on their own to ask them?
Also a little bonus scene for you. I love how Robert Pattinson decides to hold his wand in the final battle. It's something that we've never seen before, and this was actually improvised by him, but I think it works really great.
Felt so dorky to hold it like a magic wand, so I'm holding it like a gun with 2 hands.
An adult's perspective. Harry Potter is just such an honorable guy and a great role model. In this movie, he faces extreme challenges that are not made for his age, that he doesn't even want to do, and even gets bullied in school for competing in the tournament. And as if that's not enough, the challenges all become extra difficult for him. There are 4 dragons, one of which is really dangerous. Which one does Harry get? Of course, the dangerous one. Everybody has one person in the water that they care about. Harry has 2 with Hermione and Ron. The trophy is supposed to teleport you home. Harry instead gets teleported to the graveyard and has to duel with Lord Voldemort. This movie really punishes Harry so hard, physically and mentally. And what I'm trying to get at is that from an adult's perspective, I have even more respect for Harry Potter after watching this movie again as an adult. Circumstances like this are enough to make even the toughest adult crumble, but Harry not only persists, he doesn't cry about it, and even does the honorable thing under the most extreme circumstances. The scene that I think perfectly shows what I mean is when Harry Potter has to duel Lord Voldemort. He went through all the things I just mentioned, and now Lord Voldemort, the most feared wizard in all of Hogwarts, wants to kill him in a duel. What does Harry do? Take a look for yourself. He toughens up and fights. As a 14-year-old kid, man, what a character. And also a detail that I think is really important is that yes, he toughens up in that moment, but as soon as he's out of danger, he absolutely starts crying his eyes out. A very healthy role model for all of us. We should really appreciate how lucky we were growing up with these movies. And now to the ranking of Harry Potter 4. This is probably going to be a bit controversial. There's a lot of mixed opinions on this movie. Well, for me, it ranks P5. I'm sure there are many of you out there that would rank this movie dead last in the Harry Potter franchise, and I get that it's a horrible book adaptation, but simply as a movie, I think it's not that bad, and it holds a quite unique spot for me in the franchise by being all about that Triwizard Tournament. But of course, I also think that it had some weird plot and character choices, so solid P5 for me. Next up in the list, let's revisit Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Right from the first couple of minutes, I was reminded that this wasn't going to be your average Harry Potter movie. We're in the action so quickly. I mean, if you ignore the title screens, it only takes 2 minutes and 45 seconds until Harry Potter gets attacked by Dementors. And it's not like this was just a quick teaser. After 5 minutes and 50 seconds, he gets expelled from school, and after about 9 minutes, he's with the other wizards flying to the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix. We never got to the action so quickly in Harry Potter movie, and the movie achieves this by fully utilizing what the other movies have built, and for the first time just assumes that you've watched all the other movies. I feel like all the other Harry Potter movies were produced in a way that the movie could also be viewed individually. But with this one, I think you would be pretty lost if you haven't seen the other movies. And sure, for all the people that watched this as their first Harry Potter movie, that's pretty annoying. But I think at this point it's far more valuable to make a movie for the Harry Potter fans. I mean, just take a look at the Order of the Phoenix. Most of its members are people that we've met throughout the other movies. We got Mad-Eye Moody, the entire Weasley family, Sirius Black, and even Professor Lupin is back. And all of them don't get an introduction, they're just there and you're expected to know who they are. This is a very important change when you want to start building towards the climax of the franchise, which is something that looking back, I value this movie a lot more for.
And well done, everyone. Great work.
Another thing that's important when building towards the climax is having these kids grow up and getting to know more of them. In the last movies, it's really been basically Harry, Ron, and Hermione. But in this movie, we get to know so much more of them through the idea of Dumbledore's army, which is so cool, by the way. Finally, these kids aren't fighting snakes with swords or throwing rocks at werewolves, but are preparing for a war between wizards by learning and practicing their combat spells. It's also so satisfying to have Harry transition into the teacher role.
There's something that matters even more. Believing in yourself.
But speaking of combat spells, this is the first Harry Potter movie where the wizards don't have to say all the spells out loud. From a lore perspective, I couldn't find any reason for why that is. We don't get any explanation in the movie, and I think there's also nothing about this in the books. So let me know if you know anything more about this. But it's actually not necessarily something that I really like. I think it takes away from the intricacies of a well thought out magic system. For example, the most powerful spell seems to be this. But I would imagine that for the casual viewer, this version is better, and it makes it a lot easier to have intense action scenes where many spells get cast. But having said all these positive things, there are some things that do really annoy me about this movie. First of all, the general plot can be summarized like this.
He's not back. He's back.
Like, why does the Ministry of Magic do such dumb things in this movie, to the point where they're basically the villain for the first 2 hours? And having them basically be the villain for most of the movie, although they're not actually the main villain in this movie, I think creates a bit of a pacing issue. Once Dolores Umbridge was captured, the main problem was basically resolved, but because the movie can't be over at this point, Harry decides to go on this really dumb rescue mission. Now this rescue mission does lead to an amazing final battle, but I don't like how they got there, that's all I'm saying. The second thing that annoyed me was how Dumbledore decides that avoiding Harry is the best strategy to help him.
I thought by distancing myself from you, as I have done all year, he'd be less tempted.
I mean, even this kid, Luna Lovegood, was smart enough to figure out that Voldemort probably wants Harry to feel alone.
If I were you-know-who, I'd want you to feel cut off from everyone else.
Sure, these problems aren't that bad, but they are two fundamental issues for me that influence the entire movie, which is really a shame because otherwise this would have had potential to be my favorite Harry Potter movie. I mean, we get to see scenes like when Hermione and Ron have a little duel. It's something that could have easily been cut because it doesn't matter for the rest of the movie, but it's things like this that I want to see as a Harry Potter fan. It's a bit of a fan service that really wasn't that common back then. Oh, and I also hate the romance between Harry and this girl. I mean, their kiss just says it all. I think I've never seen a kiss with less chemistry between two people. I know this doesn't really fit in the flow of this video, but neither does it in the movie, so moving on. What I haven't touched on so far is the CGI, and I've never had a problem with the CGI in Harry Potter, and I think all the movies so far have held up pretty good even for today's standards. But the CGI in this movie not only holds up, but actually surpasses many movies from today. Coming out in 2007, this movie was released in what felt like the golden age of CGI. It's the same year that Transformers released, and we also had Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest at this point. Although technology has come a lot further today, this era of movies often had better CGI than movies nowadays, and Harry Potter 5 is no exception. And the best example for the great CGI also brings me to my top 3 scenes in this movie, because the first scene is the duel between Dumbledore and Voldemort. To this day, even with all the Fantastic Beasts movies, this stands as the best wizarding duel in all of Harry Potter. It has such an amazing dynamic, such clever spells, great effects. They use water, fire, and have amazing spell animations. It really is the highlight in this movie for me, and I'll take it as payback for all the times I complained about the final battle not using enough magic. The second scene is far less substantial, but it still made me laugh, and it's when Snape replies to not becoming teacher of defense against the dark arts.
But you were unsuccessful?
Obviously.
Alan Rickman as Snape doesn't get so much to do in this movie, but all the scenes he's in, he just kills as always. Just the way he replies to everything, I just love it. My third favorite scene is how Ron stands up for Harry.
Do you believe the rubbish he's come out with about you and all who?
Yeah, I do. Has anyone else got a problem with Harry?
Coming from the last movie where Ron and Harry had some beef, this is just so satisfying to see how Ron stands up for Harry when Harry is having a hard time. And that actually brings me to my experience of this movie from an adult's perspective. Because as I said before, through the concept of Dumbledore's army, we got to know a lot more characters. But that also means that we can't get a lot about Harry, Ron, and Hermione. And because we don't develop their relationship, I love that their relationship in this movie is just solid.
I'm sure Harry's kissing was more than satisfactory.
We don't get many scenes between them, and that's of course because Harry is kind of going through a hard time and also isolates himself a bit. But all the scenes that we do get, Harry is actually not that nice to Ron and Hermione most of the time because he's going through a hard time. But then it's just so satisfying to see that he has these two friends with a friendship that has really held together for several years now. And I love that Ron and Hermione support him in these tough times. And when you're going through a hard time, that's exactly when friendships like these matter, and I love seeing them on screen. I also love the chat we get between Harry and Sirius. In this movie, I think Harry for the first time is kind of unsure if he's actually a good person, especially because this movie really emphasizes the connection he has to Voldemort. And then I just love how Sirius explains to him that every person could be good and every person could be bad, because we all have good and bad within ourselves. But what matters is the part we decide to act on.
We've all got both light and dark inside us. What matters is the part we choose to act on.
I mean, by now you guys maybe know that I love to talk about choice. I mean, I made a whole video about that in The Matrix. And this is another message that kind of falls in that category, and I love it so much because it's all about choice. You have the potential to be a good person and you have the potential to be a bad person. But the important part is what you decide, what you choose to act upon. And another thing that stood out to me, or that I appreciated a lot more as an adult, is also the speech Harry gives about friendship in the end.
You're the weak one, and you'll never know love or friendship.
I love it when the protagonist in a movie kind of wins through a unique way. I mean, in this case, Harry is physically losing the fight, but mentally he's winning, and that is so powerful. And that's why I like it from the cinematic perspective, but of course the message behind it is also great. I mean, in the movie, this is kind of where Harry differentiates between him and Voldemort and how they're not the same, because Harry values friendships and would really do anything for his friends. But if you take a step back and apply this message kind of to the real world, it means that no matter how much power or money or wealth or influence you have, it doesn't matter if you don't have love and friendships in your life. So yeah, from an adult's perspective, I think there are a lot of deeper meanings and messages in this movie that I valued a lot more as an adult, and as a kid probably didn't even really notice, or at least didn't value them as much. And now, where does Harry Potter 5 fall in my ranking? I know that there are many people out there that say that this is the best Harry Potter movie, and I get why you would say that, but hey, this is my personal ranking, and for me, this movie falls on P3. I mean, this movie is great. It feels exactly how a Harry Potter movie should feel, in my opinion. It features loads of magic. I love Dumbledore's army. We get to see many powerful wizards out of the past movies. We get an amazing final battle, and in my opinion, the best wizarding duel in all of Harry Potter. So it's a solid podium contender, but slightly misses out because of some of the drawbacks I mentioned in my revisit. But still, P3, it's an amazing movie. We're now getting closer to the end, so let's revisit Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Let me start with the positives first, because this movie did a lot of things that I absolutely loved revisiting, especially now that we know that this movie is the last in the Harry Potter series, which gives us a normal school year. It already starts with little things like this chat Harry has with Professor McGonagall that really makes this feel like a school.
I was told I had to get an outstanding in my OWL.
So you did, when Professor Snape was teaching potions.
I mean, was that so hard? I can't imagine, yet other Harry Potter movies often miss out on making it feel like these students are actually living a normal school life. This is of course also the Harry Potter movie where the puberty hits the hardest. I mean, my god, these kids are getting really horny. All of this teenage drama does hit different as an adult and also comes with its downsides, but I'll get more into that later. For now, I really like that we get all this puberty, love, and romance stuff in this movie, because when else should we get it? These kids are now at an age where it feels natural, well, at least for most of the romance. And there's also no space for stuff like this in the two movies to come. Sure, you could leave it out entirely, but I think it's a part of seeing these kids grow up. I mean, of course there would be something like a love potion in the world of Harry Potter, so why not have a bit of fun with it?
She can never annoy me. I love her.
We also get our last Quidditch match in this movie. This time even with tryouts, Ron and Ginny are on the team and Harry is responsible for training all of them. It really feels like everything is coming full circle now. It's just nice to have another year at Harry Potter that checks all the boxes, like the train ride to Hogwarts, the Quidditch match, funny lessons where something explodes in a student's face. All now more nostalgic than ever, and it really would have been a shame if the last movie to feature this sort of stuff would have messed it up, but gladly it didn't. And it's also a great contrast for the later movies to play off of, so it's good that we now get another normal year of school. Another thing that we get for the last, but also the first time in this movie, and I'm very glad that we got it, is that Harry and Dumbledore finally work together. All these years, Harry looked to Dumbledore for guidance and protection, and more often than not, he was faced with resentment. So at least we get this one movie where Harry and Dumbledore become a team.
So I thought you couldn't operate within Hogwarts?
Well, being me has its privileges.
The CGI is also exceptionally well done. We're now entering an era with these Harry Potter revisits where I almost have to ask the question if today's movies can hold up with this. So it's definitely nothing that holds this movie back from today's perspective. However, the problem I have with this movie, and also why it's not necessarily my favorite Harry Potter movie to revisit, is that while I love that we get all these normal school things, after about an hour of this 2.5 hour long movie, it lacks a bit of substance for my liking. For the majority of this movie, there is no imminent danger or action that Harry is involved in. Most of the build-up and tension in this movie comes from the fact that we want to find out what Draco was chosen for and what memory Professor Slughorn is hiding. When I watched this movie for the first time, that absolutely worked, but in terms of rewatchability, these two main tension drivers don't really work anymore, so that's why a big part of the movie becomes a bit boring when you watch it another time. I think that's also why the movie felt the need to add stuff like the attack on the Dursleys' house, which was in the book and also isn't explored further. It was probably just meant as a quick action scene. Also, while the memory we finally collect from Professor Slughorn is very important, it's not really important for this movie, but more something that we had to find out for the next movies to work. And I think the movie knows that it's in a bit of an awkward position because they basically find out that, okay, we now have to find and destroy 6 Horcruxes. Well, that's definitely too much for this movie, so I guess we just start with 1 and then that's our final action scene. This leads to a final battle that doesn't really integrate into the rest of the movie. Dumbledore just happens to know this one place, they immediately head over there and return after like 10 minutes, and that's basically the final battle done. Having said that, Dumbledore's death is actually almost more exciting when revisiting this movie. Snape all throughout these movies is just amazing to revisit because in hindsight everything makes so much sense. Back then we simply thought that Snape is a traitor, but watching it now, knowing that he's a good guy that is pretending to be a traitor, just cinema at its finest.
Has it ever crossed your brilliant mind that I don't want to do this anymore?
And speaking of fine cinema, that brings me to my 3 favorite scenes in this movie. And my first favorite scene is Harry just goes with it.
You must be wondering why I brought you here.
Actually, sir, after all these years, I just sort of go with it.
I already liked this scene back then because it just shows how far Harry has come and how much he has gone through. But from today's perspective, just hearing him say after all these years just hits even harder. My next favorite scene is when Ron and Harry fight over the book.
It's a truth-telling serum. And that was...
Yes, this scene is funny, but that's not why I like it so much. I like it so much because it just builds or illustrates a great relationship between Ron and Harry. Like, Harry is the chosen one and all of that. But when it comes to scenarios like this, they're just friends. Ron doesn't think of Harry like he's the chosen one. When there's one good book, they're gonna fight over that one good book just like 2 very good friends should. And my third favorite scene is, well, I am the chosen one.
She's only interested in you because she thinks you're the chosen one.
But I am the chosen one. Okay, sorry.
This movie oftentimes tries to dive a bit into the humor side of things, and it doesn't work that often, but in this case, I really like the joke, and it also gives us a glimpse of what Harry could be if he were a bit of a different, not as likable character. Now to my experience of watching this movie from an adult's perspective. So first, let's start with the teenage romance. Remember the romance between Harry and Ginny? The romance everybody complained about and hated the movies for? Well, it turns out that when you revisit this movie as an adult, it's still shit. If anything, it's probably even worse now. Like, what a low point for all of us Harry Potter fans. I think the script doesn't do the best job for their romance in the first place, but the scenes that Harry and Ginny do have together are just so incredibly awful.
Don't you trust me?
They just have no chemistry together. It just comes across as forced and awkward. It's like I can see that the movie really wants them to be together, but it's just not happening. However, other scenes I actually quite enjoyed revisiting, and although I'm like 100 years younger, I almost felt a bit like Dumbledore.
Oh, to be young and to feel love's keen sting.
It's things like the conversation between Harry and Ron and how they talk about the nice skin of Ginny and Hermione.
Hermione's got nice skin. Wouldn't you say? As skin goes, I mean.
It's awkward, but in a relatable way. Like, yeah, that's how you feel at a young age when your hormones kick in. Besides that teenage drama, the overall darker tone of this movie makes it more fitting for an adult viewer, which is of course also nice from today's perspective. In terms of deeper adult themes that I maybe missed as a kid, I didn't find that much in this movie. There is that short segment where Ron thinks that he drank liquid luck and then performs really well in his first Quidditch match. The takeaway being that sometimes you don't need anything extra, but believing in yourself can do the trick. It's a nice message for sure, but it's not like this message is the core of the movie. It's really just that short segment. One thing I didn't really notice as a kid, but ended up really admiring as an adult, but I'm not sure if it's really a theme, it's just the sheer determination and selflessness of Dumbledore in this movie. In this movie, Dumbledore is very logical and doesn't really talk about his feelings that much. That makes it easy to miss all this, but if you think about it, he knew for a while that he must die eventually for all of this to have a happy end. That means he went through all this trouble and suffering trying to stop Voldemort, knowing that he himself will never reap the benefits of Voldemort's defeat. That's one true hero if you ask me. And now to the ranking of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. In my personal ranking, Harry Potter 6 falls on P6. First time watching this movie would definitely rank higher for me, but from a rewatchability perspective, it's not that interesting to revisit because of how the story is structured, in my opinion. We are now entering the final stretch, so let's revisit Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. First of all, this movie is the first Harry Potter movie to do a lot of things. This is the first Harry Potter movie where there's no Hogwarts, no teachers, no safety net, nothing. At least for the majority of this movie, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are all alone for the first time, and things are pretty rough. This movie shows us the low point of the Harry Potter franchise, and I don't mean the low point in like movie quality, but the low point story-wise and emotionally. Dumbledore is dead, the Ministry of Magic is infiltrated by Death Eaters, and Voldemort and hundreds of Snatchers are out to kill Harry Potter. All the while Harry, Ron, and Hermione are miserable, completely helpless, and have no clue what to do next.
He doesn't know what he's doing, does he?
None of us do.
I feel like you can't show us this low point, this terror, this helplessness, in form of a movie that's fun, engaging, and hopeful. So while watching this movie, in a way, it makes us as an audience feel exactly how Ron, Hermione, and Harry are probably feeling themselves. Watching this movie feels draining, hopeless, and sad. Now, should you aspire to produce a movie that makes the audience feel like that? Probably not, and as I said, the first time watching this movie, I had very different expectations, so it left me feeling unsatisfied. But revisiting this movie now, here's why I think, in the grand scheme of things, making us feel like that was necessary. Before things get better, things need to get worse, and this low point that we're seeing in this movie shows us everything that we were so afraid of happening for the last 6 years at Hogwarts. Showing us this terror, this miserable world, lets us know what our heroes are fighting to prevent. It wouldn't have been enough to just give us 20 minutes of feeling hopeless and then things already get better. In hindsight, I like that this movie dares to really drag us through the hardship and struggles our protagonists that we've come to love over all these years go through, and sets an amazing stage for the final movie to really deliver. Back then, after I left the cinema, I mainly felt unsatisfied because I then knew that I had to wait another year to finally see the climax. But now that you can basically watch the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2 back to back, it makes the final movie hit much harder. In a way, it does all the emotional and expositional heavy lifting so that the final movie can really shine. From today's perspective, being able to watch them back to back and knowing that Part 2 is gonna be awesome, I would have been really annoyed if they would have tried to squeeze all of this into one single movie. Like, as Harry Potter fans, shouldn't we just be happy to get more Harry Potter? Because this last book was split into 2 movies, we could really feel the emotions, dive into the tough times, and also properly set things up like the 3 Deathly Hallows. Basically, if we would think of this as a series where you have a lot more time, and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 would have been the first 5 episodes of that series, and then Part 2 would have been the last 5 episodes, I would have absolutely loved the series as a whole. But because we're in the movie world and each movie has to also work individually, it's really easy to criticize this movie. But speaking of criticizing this movie, which is really easy to do, I think it also has some great elements going for it individually that you can easily miss or forget because you're just waiting for Part 2. So now I want to share some of these elements with you, starting with my 3 favorite scenes. My first favorite scene is how Harry Potter escapes to the safe house. That entire scene of everybody drinking Polyjuice Potion to become Harry Potter is great, and an amazing visual spectacle to start off the movie. It brings back so many characters from the past movies and immediately sets the stakes for this movie by having Mad-Eye Moody and Harry's owl die. Kind of showing us, okay, the gloves are off now, anybody can die just like that. Also, we get that quick duel between Voldemort and Harry Potter while Harry is on Hagrid's bike and Voldemort is flying beside him, and that's really an amazing duel that is visually so stunning. My second favorite scene is the story about the Deathly Hallows.
Asked for a wand more powerful than any in existence. So Death fashioned him one.
It's one of these great examples where splitting the last book into 2 movies gives us the time for things exactly like this, and I absolutely love it. What a great story, and what an amazing way the animators brought it to life. It had its own totally unique animation style that was totally different from the rest of the movie, and apparently 32 artists worked on that scene for 6 months. So credit where credit is due, they did an amazing job. My third favorite scene is Dobby's death.
Hold on. Hold on. Just hold on.
Oh, what? I like to see Dobby die? Well, no, of course I didn't want Dobby to die, but from a cinematic perspective, ending the movie with the death of a very likable character, I think leaves you with that tough feeling in your chest, which is, I think, exactly the feeling we're supposed to have after this movie. And now, under my usual umbrella of looking at an older movie from an adult's perspective and looking for a deeper meaning, there's another aspect that I could appreciate about this movie a lot more from today's perspective. And that's the lesson behind the long, tough journey Harry, Ron, and Hermione go through in this movie. Now, knowing what to expect in this movie and being a lot older, I could empathize with that long, endless grind they were going through a lot more. And the lesson I see in that is the following. If you know what goal you want to reach but have no idea how to get there, that's okay. Just start. Just take the first step. Just follow the first clue or your first instinct, and you'll figure it out as you go. Will every step you take on that journey be the right step? No, of course not, but that's also fine. Taking 100 steps and having, let's say, 90 of those steps turn out to be the wrong step, it's probably still a lot better than not taking a step at all. Now, some of you maybe know exactly where I'm going with this, but to all of you that are wondering, how could that possibly be the lesson that I learned from Harry Potter 7? Let's break it down. In this movie, Harry, Ron, and Hermione have the goal to find all the remaining Horcruxes and destroy them. That's the goal, but they have no idea where they are and how to destroy them. All they know is that they can be any object, that they probably have some connection to Voldemort, that Tom Riddle's diary could be destroyed with basilisk venom, and one of the Horcruxes is this necklace.
Dumbledore sends you off to find all these Horcruxes, but doesn't tell you how to destroy them. Doesn't that bother you?
Sounds like a pretty impossible task, right? Like, where do you even start, and what are the right steps? Well, Harry, Ron, and Hermione also had no clue. Their first mission is to find the real necklace, but once they find that, they have no idea how to destroy it and what the other remaining Horcruxes even are. But does that mean that they just stop? No, they could have, but they don't.
Maybe we should just stay here, Harry. Grow old.
Instead, they just take the next step. They read books, they try to find clues, they try different places, and almost die. But hey, they didn't die, so they took a wrong step and recovered from it and just kept going. Sometimes really just wandering around aimlessly, hoping to find something. Now, from a cinematic perspective, it's questionable if you should really have your 3 protagonists wander around aimlessly for the majority of the movie, but for this lesson it works really well because that's real life. Real life isn't always exciting. You don't make progress whenever you feel like it's about damn time.
What part of this isn't living up to your expectations?
You just keep going and someday you'll make the progress you've been hoping for. Just like Harry, Ron, and Hermione finally find the Sword of Gryffindor and manage to destroy their first Horcrux, taking a big step forward on their mission to defeat Voldemort. So, does that mean that there's nothing wrong with this movie and that it's an absolute masterpiece? No, of course not. It for sure has some pacing issues, could have been trimmed down slightly more, like it's 2.5 hours long, and it could have also benefited from a slightly more exciting final battle. Harry Potter 7 Part 1. I hope I'm not going to upset too many people with this ranking, but for me, it's ranked last in the Harry Potter franchise. Yes, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 is the Harry Potter movie that I enjoy revisiting the least. For me, the reasons for that are quite obvious. That's why in my revisit, I tried to concentrate on the positive sides of that movie instead of hating on it, because it's not all bad and it is very important for the setup of the final movie, but ranking this movie individually, it's the least exciting for me to revisit. And now, let's revisit the final movie in the franchise, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. I'll begin by asking the question, what is it that you really want from the final movie in a franchise? In my opinion, you want the important characters out of the past movies to return, ideally have some relevancy or at least appear again. You also want as many of these characters as possible to complete their character arc by showing us how far they've come over all these years. You also want the story to come to a satisfying conclusion. Satisfying, of course, being a very general term, but it could mean that the ending felt earned, rewarding, and emotional. You just want to feel something when the credits start rolling. I think you also want most of the questions to get answered, and I say most of the questions because I think it's good to leave some aspects up to our imagination. Maybe some surprises along the way, not just end in the way everybody would expect the story to end. And lastly, you want the final movie to bring something to the table itself and not just profit off of all the work the other movies have done. It sounds pretty easy and straightforward when you say it like that, right? But it's incredibly hard to implement, and that's why we see so many movies and franchises failing at this. Of course, you're probably never gonna end a franchise or a series of movies in a way that seems perfect to everybody. I mean, what is a satisfying ending? What are the important characters? What other people find surprising, other people maybe expected. So having said that, for me, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows gets all these aspects right and even excels in some of them. So let's break it down. In this last movie, we reunite or at least see so many of the past characters we've come to love. Some of them being Professor Lupin, Professor McGonagall, Dumbledore, Hagrid, the entire Weasley family, Neville Longbottom, Luna Lovegood, Draco Malfoy, Ron's first girlfriend, and many more students from Hogwarts. Seeing all of them again and of course having the final movie mainly take place at Hogwarts makes the journey of Harry, Ron, and Hermione feel complete and like it came full circle. And we not only see all these characters, but so many of them, and even characters where I would have never expected it, get a really satisfying conclusion to their character. My favorite one being Neville Longbottom.
Neville Longbottom.
My god, what a surprise he was when I first watched this movie in 2011. He's like Harry Potter 2.0, but in badass. He's not the chosen one, he was never praised as a talented, strong wizard. He started off his journey at Hogwarts kind of as the dumb, clumsy kid, and even in Harry Potter 5, he was the one who struggled the most to perform the Expelliarmus spell. And now, he's strong, brave, kind, and heroic. I would like to say that he's my favorite unexpected character conclusion, but there's a little someone that shall remain unnamed for now because he deserves his own segment. So as I said, Neville was great, but I also really like Draco Malfoy's ending, and to this day I think it's such a shame that they cut the scene where he tosses Harry his wand at the ending.
Potter!
That would have just made his character conclusion even better, but I mean they filmed it, so even though it's not in the movie, in my mind that scene just happened. I choose to make that scene happen in my mind. Professor McGonagall also gets a really satisfying conclusion by stepping up to become the headmaster of Hogwarts. Many of the other character arcs ended because they sacrificed themselves in the fight for freedom, which gives the final movie weight and emotion and can also be a satisfying conclusion to a character.
Your son.
Others will tell him what his mother and father died for. One day, he'll understand.
In my opinion, the story itself also comes to a satisfying conclusion and answers enough questions. Having Harry and Voldemort face off against each other in a one-on-one makes sense and feels satisfying because after so many duels that they have had in the past, Harry could finally win this one because they destroyed all the Horcruxes. The fact that Voldemort dies clearly marks the end of his reign and terror, which is what the entire franchise was building on. Also ending it by having the three of them stand there as the sun comes out, finally out of danger after so many years of terror, is also all I needed to enjoy that feeling of relief. Everything I mentioned so far was satisfying, at least for me, but I think also what many of us expected from the story. However, this movie also had some surprises up its sleeve, and the biggest surprise being the reveal of Professor Snape's backstory.
You have your mother's eyes.
This is arguably by far the most remarkable aspect about this final movie. I touched on Professor Snape several times in my other Harry Potter revisits because it's so mind-blowing how this was secretly being set up since the first movie. Then we got the reveal in the last movie, and in hindsight it all makes so much sense. Turning a character we all hated for 7 movies into the hidden hero in one single scene is simply amazing.
What will you give me in exchange, Severus? Anything.
But that wasn't the only amazing thing about this movie. My 3 favorite scenes were also amazing, and my first favorite scene in this movie was, I've always wanted to use that spell.
I've always wanted to use that spell.
It's generally an epic scene as they all gather to defend Hogwarts, but this subtle line brings so much life to the character of Professor McGonagall. I just love it. My second favorite scene is starting with a dragon.
That's unfortunate.
Since Harry Potter 7 Part 1 was a bit slower paced, I like that we hit the ground running with this one by diving into the action quite quickly. The dragon added some nice variety to all the magic and was also animated beautifully. I think I didn't even mention the CGI anymore in these last couple movies because it's just so good and holds up so well, or is even better than many movies nowadays. The fact that I'm not mentioning it anymore from today's perspective is really supposed to mean it's awesome. I really like the CGI in Harry Potter, and I think they're going to hold up really well even for many more years. My third favorite scene is Harry breaking the Elder Wand.
With that, we'd be invincible.
And the reason why I love this scene so much actually brings me to my adult's perspective, because in addition to all the great elements I've mentioned so far, this movie manages to integrate some deeper themes that also really take it to the next level emotionally. Harry breaks the Elder Wand and thereby breaks the cycle of chasing power by giving up the power himself. A very noble adult thing to do that perfectly concludes his journey from a small boy in the first movie to the young man we see now. A young man that also doesn't seek vengeance but fights for peace, as showcased by his action of risking his life to save Draco Malfoy from the flames, although he caused Harry so much pain over all these years. Another very noble action. As a kid or teenager, I think I couldn't really see this, but now looking back, I can definitely say that characters like Harry Potter definitely had a big impact on the development of my moral compass and my discovery of learning what's right and what's wrong. And what can I say? Harry is just a great role model, which I think we were all very lucky to grow up with. This movie also heavily dives into the themes of love and sacrifice in form of characters like Professor Snape, who I talked about earlier. He basically sacrificed his own happiness and his reputation for the rest of his life just to protect a child of a woman he loved. If that isn't true love, then I don't know what is. But this theme is also represented by characters like Professor Lupin, who gave his life in the battle against Voldemort. And of course Harry himself, who had to knowingly sacrifice himself in order to save everyone. 2 very powerful adult themes that I absolutely love this movie for. And now, the grand finale, Harry Potter 7 Part 2. Ooh, where is it gonna fall in my ranking? I don't know. Yeah, it's P2 for me. For me, it's always difficult to rank the final movie in a franchise because of course it feels special. Like, it features the climax of what all the other movies have been building up towards, so it can also profit from all the amazing work the other movies have done. So I wanted to resist the temptation of ranking it P1, but it's still P2 for me because at the same time, it's still really easy to mess up the final movie in a franchise. And if that happens, it's such a shame because it really drags down your entire memory of the franchise as a whole. So I'm really happy that not only did they not mess up with the final movie, but they absolutely nailed it in my opinion. So those are all the Harry Potter movies revisited and ranked. Do you agree with my ranking? Or probably the more interesting question, where do you not agree with my ranking? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you for watching this mega Harry Potter compilation. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.